Here we go with Christian in Colorado. You're on with Ian and Matt. How are you, Christian? Thank you for waiting.
I'm doing very well. How are you doing, Matt?
Well, I'm doing all right, I guess. Better than I was. We had to postpone this once because I got sick, but I'm feeling good. How can we help?
Well, I will guarantee I will be much more respectful than the previous caller.
I think it was, I'm not too worried about the disrespect thing. If somebody wants to say that I'm thick or dim or narcissist, whatever, but it kind of set it up as a, like, why would I take this seriously thing? And no offense to you, I'm not saying this right to you, but I don't give a damn about the respect. I want people to actually be able to make a case and demonstrate it. And I know that my friend Ian is sitting here. And do you know how overjoyed we would have been for anybody to give a demonstration that they're getting signals from a God? I mean, that's huge. So I don't know what you're trying to demonstrate today, Christian, but please have at it.
Absolutely. So I've listened to your show a couple times, and I would like to, adjust a misunderstanding of the fine-tuning argument. That is to say, the fine-tuning argument is not that it's just because this universe is highly improbable that therefore there must be a designer. Because that would be like, I just won the Powerball. It must be rigged in my favor. No, that doesn't make any sense. What I would like to use is the ping pong ball analogy. Like, for example, if there were trillions and trillions of black ping pong balls and one white ping pong ball, and someone were to say, if I pick a black one, you die. If I pick the white one, one out of trillions, you live. Now, I'm not concerned with the probability that the particular white ball was picked. Any ball is equally improbable. However, it is incomprehensibly more probable that whichever ball is picked, it would be black rather than white. So you're not trying to explain why this particular ball was picked rather than another ball. You're asking why a life-permitting ball was picked rather than a life-prohibiting ball. And this is just my whole point.
Christian, I need to pause for 1 second because I think you misspoke, or I misheard. Because early you said there was one black ball and a whole bunch of white, and then later on you said it was infinitely more probable that you were going to get a black ball. So I just want to make sure we have the same experiment details.
Right. I think I must have misspoke. There are trillions of black balls and one white one.
Okay.
And So out of all of those black balls, if a black ball is picked, you die. But if a white one is picked, you live. And it's trillions to one. And so this is my overall point. And if we were to parallel this from the ping pong ball analogy to the universe, it's not that the improbability of this particular universe existing. Rather, it's the improbability that whatever universe does exist, it would be a life-permitting one. That, I say, screams for design, or at least builds a good scientific or philosophical case for design. I just wanted to get your thoughts on that.
Sure. And I'm going to get Ian to chime in on this, but I have one question for you, and that is, let's say there's a trillion black balls and one white ball. How many times do we get to grab a ball and pull it out?
That is a very good question. We could say you only have five times in a row. You can only say do it once. We can put in like quadrillions of black balls here. I think it's just the overall point.
My point is that if you wanted to make it directly analogous to what actually happens in the universe, when you talk about, for example, the life-building chemicals, it's not like we had one attempt at that in one location. It's very probable that throughout the universe at different times, there are constantly attempts, and it's only the attempts that work that then proceed to other things. Where are you on fine-tuning it?
Well, first of all, if it wasn't a white ball, you wouldn't be here to comment on it. So there's that. But Christian, if we can just take just one step back, because I've only just had the privilege of talking to you, what do you believe and why? Are we talking about a deist here? Do you have a particular God in mind, or what are we taking an argument toward? Just so that I know.
Oh yeah, that's a very good question. I am a theist, I would say, and if you ask why I'm a theist, I would say that I think the scientific and philosophical reasons and evidences that lean towards God's existence, just the overall arguments of natural theology.
Which God? Which God?
Which God? Well, I would say the Christian God, but that would have to deal with the historical evidence for the resurrection. But that's not the topic of my phone call today.
Okay. And how did you find out about this Christian God?
Well, I guess we're going a little bit off topic, but that's okay. I would say that the Christian God, I guess I would have two responses. One, I find the historical evidence for the resurrection of Jesus convincing, and Matt knows all about that. He's debated Mike Lacona, and so he knows all about that. But I would also say that the multiple near-death experiences that Christians have had, and that they somehow correlate to a metaphysical, outside of nature reality. Yes.
I apologize to you. I should have expressed my question a little more clearly. Thank you for sharing what you shared. How did you originally first hear about this God that you believe in? Because I don't think you just made him up yourself in your adult life.
Oh, okay. Now I understand. I would say that originally, I would say I was born in a Christian home. However, due to shows, I actually like the Atheist Experience and multiple atheist YouTube creators. I actually did doubt Christianity for a long period of time, even though I was raised in a Christian home. But I would also say that the reasonings and evidences brought forth by the likes of William Lane Craig convinced me to remain a Christian.
Right. And is it the case, I'm just talking to you now, did you believe in this God before anyone had come up with or presented the fine-tuning or the billiard balls and black and white to you? Did you still believe in the God before you came upon this particular line of reasoning?
Yes, I did believe in this Christian God before that line of reasoning was available, mainly because I grew up in a Christian home.
Right. So you don't need it.
Well, when I encountered certain objections from the atheist community in terms of how I believe, in terms of why I should not believe in this Christian God, I did find them at one point convincing, and they brought up very good points. And Matt was, Matt played a part in that. He put a very convincing.
He always does. Yeah,
but then,
he's very convincing.
Right, but then, and then when I read and listened to the likes of people like William Lane Craig or Gary Habermas or Alvin Plantinga, the type, I found them to be more convincing. So I would say
what worries
becoming an atheist.
Christian, what worries me a little bit about that, and this is just an observation on my part. Ian's making a strong point, which is if you begin to believe, then of course you're more likely to find more profound attempts at proof convincing because you have some bias towards it. But what I just heard you talk about is curious to me, and I don't want to try to psychoanalyze you or overanalyze the statement, but you didn't talk about evidence. You talked about how convincing and compelling I was, and then you talked about how convincing and compelling William Lane Craig and Plantinga and Habermas are. Everything about what you said is about people and personalities and how compelling they are. And nothing about what you said is about the evidence for the proposition. That worries me.
Well, the topic of the question that Ian mentioned was kind of like an overall synopsis as to why I believe. At least that's what I got forth. I didn't know that the intent of the question was to present an immediate case for Christianity.
Well, you presented an argument by analogy to the ping pong balls, talking about fine tuning. Now, fine tuning applies to, in many different ways. There's the anthropic principle of the universe itself. Hey, we live in a universe that could give rise to life. But if we didn't, it would be truly more miraculous and more consistent with a God performing miracles if you and I and Ian lived in a universe that wasn't capable of producing life. And so your example of here's 1 trillion black ping pong balls and one white one, and you have to pick the white one. Well, that's why I asked how many trials there are, because if you look at the science that is investigating, for example, abiogenesis, the current best models include a number of different chemicals interacting over and over again in countless trials repetitively. And that could be well over 1 trillion trials over 1 billion years. And the only thing that ever needs to happen is for one self-replicating molecule to take off. And as long as you have an unlimited number of tries for that to happen, then it's not only not particularly impressive, but inevitable, kind of in the way that, the old adage about monkeys pounding away on typewriters forever are going to write the entire works of Shakespeare, not Shakespeare's. So yeah, beat me up for that later. But so the example that you gave, the fine tuning, you really wanted mine and Ian's thoughts on the fine tuning thing. My thoughts are that when we properly understand the science behind this sort of stuff, what we have are multiple trials, and the fact that life exists in a universe that was life permitting isn't all that impressive. And since we only have one universe to say, oh, we live in the universe where life is permitting, you don't have any other universes to compare it to, anything hypothetical. But Ian's take on this is, you didn't come to believe in God because of a fine-tuning analogy. And that's why I was so caught off by you just talking about personality. So here's a secondary question, which I think we can all appreciate. If you are now convinced that a God exists, and in particular, some version of a Christian God, what would prove you wrong?
Oh, that is a very good question. So in terms of particularly the Christian God, I would like to see how the case against the resurrection would be more compelling than the case for the resurrection. And in terms of just an overall theistic God, I would like to see why the science or the philosophical arguments behind that back up atheism more so than theism. That's what would, I would say, give me a bit of a leeway towards atheism.
So,
Christian? Are you, when you're thinking about these things, and they're obviously issues that you've looked into in great detail, probably more than I have, to be honest, does it ever bother you the ways in which we live in a world that in many ways is really not very finely tuned for us, like a world where children get cancer, where people die from malaria, where there's large parts of the Earth's surface where humankind don't fit in very well and suffer horribly? And does the fact that, I mean, you're talking about fine tuning, but it could be an awful lot better. And what bothers me about the fine tuning argument, and it did even when I used to be a believer, which I was at one point, was that I shouldn't be able to come up with better ideas than God. Right? We're talking about a supreme being, way more smart than I am, and everybody's more intelligent than I am. I'm not very bright. And yet I could come up with a more finely tuned Earth and world and universe than he did. I shouldn't be able to do that. I shouldn't be able to think of a much better world. One where, for example, there's a whole host of diseases that children don't get. Maybe older people do, like senility and dementia. But instead we live in one where a child of 2 can die from bone cancer. It's not very finely tuned, or it could be better finely tuned.
Oh, okay. So it sounds like you're kind of combining the fine tuning with the problem of evil. And I will admit the problem of evil is
no. I'm just saying, I was always, even when I was a believer, and I'm sorry I talked over you. I will shut up and I want to listen to you. But even when I believed, I was puzzled. I was a little bit bewildered by the fact that I could come up with a better world than God did. I shouldn't be able to do that.
Oh, okay. Well, see that. I think we're getting into some pretty dangerous what's the word? We're getting some pretty dangerous theological territory because that we could create. To say we could create a better world, one better than one hypothetical omniscient being.
Well, it's just that I could think of one. I shouldn't be able to. He's God. He's like really much brighter than I am, and yet I can think of a much better world. For example, one which where the temperate zone is spread over a larger part of the Earth's surface, and it's actually more habitable than it currently is.
I mean, I've already demonstrated, and I think I would hope that you would agree that I could write a better book than the Bible right now. Like I could rewrite the Bible and reverse its position on slavery, and it would be better.
Who's the writer?
Yeah.
Who's the writer? hey, whoa, back off my territory. You're on my patch now.
Yep. Ian could write a book that's 10 times better than the Bible. I could just improve the Bible. But also, when you talk about a better world, okay, there are creatures in this world that reproduce asexually, aren't right? We all agree with that?
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So wouldn't a better world be for humans to reproduce asexually? And then all of a sudden that eliminates rape. It eliminates abortion. It eliminates all of these problems. So I would argue that perhaps an asexual world. Now, granted, you can say, oh, there's some secret hidden reason why this other world is better. And by the way, don't get me wrong, I enjoy sex. I'm a fan. I'm glad I don't.
I was just going to say that would be I'm not sure that would be a better world because it's really good fun.
Yeah, I'm fine with that. But the other thing, Christian, and we're going to have to move on to other callers here in a bit, but you seem to suggest that the evidence for the resurrection was better than the evidence against it. And I'm wondering what evidence you have for resurrection, because I've seen no evidence that anyone who's ever been dead for a couple of days has ever come back to life. And I certainly couldn't believe it based on ancient reports where I don't have any ability to investigate and I have no way of determining what actually happened. So how is it you can claim the evidence for a resurrection is more reasonable than that against it when you have copies of translations of copies of hearsay and no physical evidence at all?
Okay, well, when you say physical evidence, are you talking archaeological evidence?
There is no physical. I'm answering your question. There is no physical evidence that can tie anything at all to Jesus, period, as an existing real person, let alone someone who died and came back a day and a half later.
Well, in your actually review of the debate between Bart Ehrman and Robert Price, you said you leaned towards the non-Jesus mythicist view.
Correct. I'm not advocating. Christian, I did not just now advocate for mythicism. What I said was there wasn't physical evidence for even the existence of Jesus, but I'm specifically concerned about the physical evidence with respect to a resurrection. I'm fine with the notion that maybe a Jesus existed, but I have no evidence that a Jesus was killed and then rose from the dead a day and a half later. And as far as I can tell, neither does anybody else, including Mike Licona, who I debated on this subject, who thought it would be a better idea to talk about floating trash can lids and Ouija boards. He presented no evidence, and neither has anyone else. I've debated the resurrection many times. I don't understand, and this is I genuinely want to know. I don't understand how you or anyone else can say that the evidence for the resurrection is better than the evidence against it. Show me someone who's died and come back.
Well, that's kind of why the resurrection was a big deal, because that never happened. but I do understand where you are coming from.
Christian, go ahead.
Can I just share something with you that I found was helpful to me, even when I was still a believer? That this won't convince you of anything. It's just that I think you're a thinking kind of, pensive, contemplative sort of guy, and I just want to share something with you. Can I take 1 minute?
Of course.
Yeah. So JFK, unfortunately, was assassinated in 1963, which is still within some people's living memory. There are still witnesses we can talk to. We have color film of it. We have an audio recording from a secret one of the special agents, Victor Belt. We had numerous eyewitnesses at the time, possibly hundreds. And then we have the Warren Commission, and forensic evidence and medical evidence was presented. And people were doing, since then, have done elaborate computer graphics showing the trajectories of bullets and all sorts of things. There was a huge amount of evidence. And there's still over 100 books written about it, and it's controversial. I'm not saying that the lone shooter theory is wrong. I'm just saying it's controversial. There's disagreement. There's different points of view. And that's something that only happened in 1963 with color film, with audio recording, with eyewitnesses, with forensic evidence, medical evidence, and the whole Warren Commission. And yet we're still not really sure what happened, or at least we can't be 100% sure what happened. And so even when I was a believer, I thought, to think about something that happened roughly 2,000 years ago when we have none of this, to say we can be certain about what happened, I think is a little far-fetched.
Okay, I do understand. And see, that is the fine line that historians have to walk on. Because and I would respectfully disagree with kind of this hyper skeptical approach to history, because with that approach, I mean, I can quote a bunch of New Testament scholars who are not Christian, like Bart Ehrman and John Dominic Crossan, who firmly agree that the crucifixion of Jesus is indisputable. But they approach that
The
with
resurrection?
the use of physical evidence.
Do they agree about the resurrection?
I didn't catch that.
Do they agree about the resurrection?
No, they don't. That wasn't the point I was trying to make. But
What that's called, Christian, is that's called cherry picking. I asked specifically about why the resurrection was more believable, and you want to cite Bart Ehrman as saying that the crucifixion of Jesus was undeniable. Bart Ehrman doesn't believe the resurrection was undeniable. And by the way, Bart Ehrman's methods for historical verification are as problematic as anybody else's, because, you know, we don't have a time machine. But if you want to tell me that the evidence for the resurrection is better than the evidence against the resurrection, I want to know what that evidence is, because I have mountains of evidence that people who've been dead for a day don't come back. And then when I mention that, you want to do what many other apologists have tried to do and twist that as if, but that's what makes it so impressive, because if people came back from the dead regularly, it wouldn't be a big deal if Jesus came back. But you know what? Have you actually read the Bible? Because not only did Jesus supposedly raise Lazarus from the dead, but when the temple veil tore, the dead bodies supposedly got up and marched on Jerusalem. So there's supposedly a bunch of people who rose from the dead, including Jesus, all in this one story. And what evidence do you have that any of it actually happened?
Okay. I do understand your point and where you are coming from. But I would say that the use of the common historical method, that, you know, this is where I would respectfully disagree with you and say your approach to the use of the historical method is kind of hyper skeptical and a bit flawed. Because
no. I asked you what evidence you have that any of this happened. You can say all day long that I'm just too damn skeptical, but I asked what evidence there was. So either present the evidence or we're moving on to another caller.
Well, I would be more than happy to call back and present.
I'm sure you would, because that's what everybody says when they're cornered. Why wouldn't you do it now?
What? No. Well, no. Well, I know I'm doing it out of respect for the other callers, because
of course you are.
I would like to talk to you.
Well, that's wonderful.
Right.
Okay. Well, that's kind of ad hominem, because my intentions are good. But I just want to respect the time of other callers.
Well, thank you, Christian. Thank you.
Me too.
Okay.